what I'm going to do this evening is I'm going to resurrect a video from the past that I thought was valuable and was overlooked. And it has to do with how to use the left hand to create rhythm, and particularly tenths, walking tenths, and also stride technique. That's what I want to do. Now there's many players online, great stride players, that if you're interested in stride, you want to watch them, not me. I'm just going to give you some theory and how I approach stride, what I do with stride, and what I do with my left hand when I'm playing a certain style of music. And this is for the song It Had to Be You. Now here we go. I have a to-do list, requests that I've had from various people and subscribers to do certain things, and I want to go down through it and check them off. So the first one I want to start with is going into more detail on the stride piano style. Now, a lot of people want to play stride piano or want to know something more about it, and I'm no expert by any stretch of the imagination, but I know a little bit about it, and I know a little bit about theory, and I can show you from my point of view how I'm able to play it. And I try to simplify everything and understand and break it down into a few different concepts. So the first concept I'm going to start with is the broken tenths and how to combine that with the bass note chord technique. We'll start with that one. Before we start with the first concept, I just want to say I'm going to be approaching this video from the point of view of the left hand. And I'll deal with the right hand on another video because the left hand is so important to stride that I want to just focus on one thing in this video. Otherwise, I'd have to make this video like 45 minutes long. I won't deal with the right hand concepts until another time. But here we go now with the left hand concepts for It Had to Be You, stride technique. I want to start out by saying I invite you to download the score to what I just played and have it in front of you while I talk about it, because these points will be easy to understand if you're looking at the music as well as the keyboard here. So I want to keep these segments short because I don't want to do long videos anymore like I used to. So I'm going to go through this as rapidly as I can. That's practical. But I start out with, from the first measure now, it's an introduction, but then when the melody comes in, this is the first measure here. Now I'm playing a tenth and then up to a chord. So the tenth falls on beat 1 and the chord falls on beat 2, and then another tenth on beat 3 and then another chord on beat 4. So it alternates like that. It's always the bass note, then the chord. Like that, but I'm using tenths rather than just single bass notes. Some cases I'm using single bass notes and other times octaves, but in this case I'm beginning right with the tenth. So I go the tenth and it's broken or arpeggiated. You have a choice of doing it broken like that and like that, or arpeggiating it like this. See, the arpeggiated works better if it's just one beat. Like if you're doing the chord up here, then the arpeggiated works good like this. Or if you can just play the tenth, you can play it like that. I tend to break them, like arpeggiate them like that. So 1, 2, 3, 4, something like that. I use the pedal to sustain it, like. So now I'm sustaining that with the pedal. That's an important point. So that's the first thing you want to practice, and that's not easy. So you have to spend some time with that, getting this sense of the broken 10th or the arpeggiated 10th, and then the chord. And then a bass note, another 10th. Now we'll move on to the next step, which I call peripheral vision. Concerning stride piano, some people have asked me, how do you know how to find the notes, the bass notes? How do you know the distance to go, and how do you find them? How do you make that easier to do? A lot of it is just practice and experience, but it also involves a concept of peripheral vision, in which you're looking right here, but you're actually seeing where these notes are. See, I can see these, I'm looking here, but I can see these notes. I can see that G, I can see that D in my peripheral vision. So if I'm playing note, that kind of thing, I can find the note. Now, when you first start this, to do this, you're not going to use peripheral vision. You're going to actually look at the left hand. So like the beginning of the song, you want to look at this and then look directly at the left hand movement, and just maybe practice the left hand by itself. And you're looking at it, and you're beginning to, you practice this enough, you begin to get a sense of what that how that distance works. In other words, from here to here, to here, to here, or wherever. You're getting a sense of that. And as you get more keyboard knowledge, or knowledge of the keys, and begin to feel them, or get the feeling sense of the keys, tactile sense of it, you will begin to sense those distances. But also the peripheral vision, like I'm looking here, but my gaze can see the outside center, outside of the center. I'm looking here, but I can see this. So that helps me to find these notes, you know, like when I'm going like this. The experts, of course, can do this so fast. These guys that can, these expert stride pianists have practiced that enough and got the sense of that to such a degree that they can move really fast with it. And the only way you can get to that good is to practice a lot. It wasn't an interest of mine to become an expert stride pianist, but I wanted to be able to do it occasionally, you know, at certain tempos, not at really rapid tempos. If you want to learn to do this really fast, you're going to have to put a lot of time into it, I think. There's no way around that. But this peripheral vision idea is very important, because eventually you want to be able to not even look at the keys. Like right now I'm doing it, but I'm not even looking at the keyboard. Now, some of this helps me because of the tenths, because I know where the 10th is. I know that 10th helps me to find that bass note. Sometimes I miss it. I missed it there, but so I'm not looking at the keys now. But you want to start out by looking directly here. You know, find the notes, find the chords and the bass notes, and then look here, gaze here, and then see if you see peripheral vision. If you can find it, would be the next step. You got to practice each step for a long time till you get it down, and then looking directly straight ahead, not at the keys, and see if you can still find those notes. Taking it very slow at first and concentrating on the left hand by itself. Okay, we'll move to the next step. Now the next step for me would be to simplify the left hand chords. So in other words, you have the ability here a lot of times to just play a 2-note chord and it's going to be enough. So it isn't always going to necessarily be a 4-note chord or even a 3-note chord here like that. But sometimes, like in measure 6, I'm just using a 2-note chord. I do this, then I go up to here, then I go down, and I go back to that chord, which is just a 2-note chord, and that's enough because I'm filling in a lot of harmony in the right hand. So like right there, I'm like, see that, there I have a 5-note harmony, melody and 4-note harmony with just 2 notes in the left hand. So the 2 notes that you pick are important. You usually want it to be something other than the root, because you're playing the root in the left hand, or maybe you're playing the 5th, but whatever you're not playing. Like here I'm playing the root, it's a D7, so I'm playing a D. Here I'm playing the 3rd and the 7th. So that's the idea there. Now, so that's the thing. Simplify the chords in the left hand. Often you can do that. Here's a C7. I'm just playing the 3rd and the 7th. Then I go up here to a G diminished, G flat diminished, or I play a 3-note chord there, but I could play a 2-note chord like that. So there's many instances where you can use just 2 notes. And that's an important thing to understand and to try out. See, here's a C7 with just the 3rd and the 7th, but with the 5th in the bass. It sounds fine, just like that. We'll move to the next step. Okay, this is an important concept, and I call it walking tenths. And in a song like this, it had to be you have certain measures where it's just one chord, like there's a G7 for like 2 measures. What are you going to do in there? You're just going to play like this? That's kind of boring. So, and also I don't always like to just play bass note chord. I like to do something like this. So I can walk, these are walking tenths. Like that, and that's an important thing. If you break them, you could do it, or you can do it like this. See, so like I have, right here I used it on measure 7. I have that kind of thing. You can move it. These can move all over the place. Like now, that takes some theory knowledge to know when to use that. But often this works when you just have. See, I'm going right up the scale of the G scale, but in tenths, and then I'm adding the 5th in there too. But here, actually, I used on the second one. You could call it an A minor, but I used actually an F chord with an A in the bass. And here is a C. This is like a G with a B in the bass. But you've got the walking tenths. So I use that quite often here, and a couple times you'll see it in different measures where I go, you know, like descending or ascending. So you want to find those on the music and see how they're used. Now we'll go to the next step. This last concept that I want to talk about, which is a very important one, is the approach chord concept. And in this particular case, I'm using diminished chord approaches, and I'm also using bass line approaches. In other words, either stepwise bass line movement or chromatic bass line movement, either ascending or descending, and I'm using diminished chord approaches either from above or below. And this takes some theory knowledge, and I did talk about this in a previous video, so you might want to check out my previous video on diminished chord approaches. But to give you an example of how I used it in this tune, particularly when you're moving from one chord to the next, and say it's just one chord for the whole measure, or it's 2 measures of one chord, you want to break it up with something more interesting. So I use substitute chords and then approaches to the substitute chords. So in the case of, say, measure 10, we have a G7 now moving to a C7. Then it stays on C chord for 2 measures, then moves to D minor. So like on the G7 now, I use an approach to the C chord, moving in the bass line from the 5th of the G chord down a half step to the C7. I do that a lot, these half step approaches like that. Then I go C7, then I use a chromatic, well, I would use a diminished approach, which is a chromatic diminished approach to an inversion of a C7. So it's G flat diminished moving to C7 with a G in the bass. Now that's very important to understand that I can move to any one of the chord tones of a C7. I can approach a C7 from a B diminished. In this case, I'm approaching the 5th of the chord from a G flat diminished. See, so the G flat diminished approaches the C7 like that. And then I use another diminished approach, a D flat diminished approach to a D minor, like that. So I use that chromatic approach from below to move to the chord that I'm using there. How you want to use it. Now from measure 10, it sounds like this. Now that's very important to understand, not only from theory point of view to reharmonize, but also from stride, because in stride piano, you don't want it to be just a boring thing like this, where it's just, you know, you want to have interesting movement. If you study anything that Scott Joplin did, he always had beautiful approaches to different chords using different partials of the chord. Partials meaning the root, third, fifth, seventh, whatever. You could approach it from different ways. So this is approaching now a C7 using a chromatic stepwise approach, descending from the fifth of the G down to the C7. Then a chromatic approach, a G flat diminished chord to a C7 chord with a G in the bass, then down to a D flat diminished, approaching a D minor 7 there. Now that's a little complicated, but you can look at it on the score and then study it. This is an important point, and then look back on my previous video about diminished approaches. So that's a very important thing to learn, not only to reharmonize your songs, but also to know how to play stride piano and make it interesting harmonically. So now we'll wrap things up. I'd like to wrap up by saying a good way to maybe use this video to best advantage would be to download or look at a regular score of this song, a very simple score of this lead sheet type of score, and compare it to what I've written out here and see how I've reharmonized the song and how I've applied it to the stride technique so that you get the most out of it harmonically. And you will learn some theory as well as some stride technique. So I hope you like this. Let me know. I really love to hear from you. It keeps me going if you send me a comment, if you give me a thumbs up, and ask me a question or whatever. Tell me if you like this, and I will go through my checklist. So thanks so much, and I'll see you next time. Take care. Bye-bye. Wrapping up, I want to say thank you so much for watching this revival video from the past. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something. Please write to me. I love to hear from you. A simple response is all I need. And if you have a question, please write to me as well, or write to my email address, and I will address all your questions and so on. I don't do Skype. I don't do online lessons yet. But please encourage me, and maybe sometime in the future I will. So thanks so much. I really enjoy doing these for you, and particularly when I hear from you. So until next time, I will say, in the words of my great friend Hermie Dressel, swing loose, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.